sometimes painful, sometimes beautiful.
Sometimes painful, sometimes beautiful. So let's start with the beautiful aspects. And Prof, I'll start with you on this. I mean, what brought about the concept to have this kind of work done, and what inspired your decision to speak to the women you spoke to in this documentary?
I'll have to go a little bit back in time. So Kate, who's online, Kate is an historian, I'm a sociologist. Kate had met through a mutual friend, colleague, senior scholar. And at some point, Kate said, let's do some work on archiving women's stories, historian, that we didn't know. And of course, COVID came, so we started this project in 2019. COVID came, so we couldn't interview everybody, we couldn't go to every part of the country, but this is how we ended up with the 16. And as Aseye will always remind us, there are other women in the film that we didn't interview personally, but whose stories are also reflected.
Right, thank you very much for that insight. Kate, I'm coming to you next. I mean, if the only lens you had to view the images, the stories, or the representation of the Ghanaian woman was through this movie, what would you share with us becomes your conception of the profile of the Ghanaian woman who spoke?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think at one level, I think most people who see the film will have other ways of thinking about women in Ghana and other experiences to bring to bear. So particularly for people in Ghana, the film probably isn't going to be their primary or their only exposure. We're going to kind of be one perspective among a lot of other perspectives. The issue of how people are represented, it's always very problematic. I think what I like about what we've been able to do is identify stories from some women who are quite prominent and are quite well known and are already, their struggles and their ideas and what they've wanted to do, their projects are already sort of known. But I think we've also tried to uncover a bit those who are not known. So I think it's more about, less about trying to define a Ghanaian woman or the Ghanaian woman that people should relate to, and more about putting out there some experiences and ambitions and ideas and goals and struggles that maybe people are not so aware of, so that the picture of Ghanaian women can become a little bit broader. But I wouldn't ever want to say that our picture is definitive or that it's the only way of thinking about women in Ghana. I hope that's answered your question.
Partly, but thanks for sharing that. It's a very academic way of not getting yourself into trouble. But I mean, as a director, and for me, as a woman who comes from the northern parts of the country, Upper West, at least I've seen representation in Pogna, who also hails from my hometown, so I feel represented. But I also am a Muslim, so for a director, and looking at the profiles of the women that we heard from today, do you think it fits into the narrative that the history of activism has always been amongst the educated, those who have had opportunity to be exposed, usually Akan women, and mostly from the University of Ghana, if you look at it, and in particular organizations? And as a director, how did you try to overcome, the risk of falling into this narrative?
So, as said earlier, we had a long list but we can't make a 6-hour film, neither can we make a 3-hour film. The most we could make was a 1 hour 40, which was a struggle because it was supposed to have been a 30-minute film, but obviously it's not possible. So it went to 1 hour, and then went to 1 hour 40, of which we killed many darlings. And it was a difficult process, but also, like we said, we lost some people because, not that they died, but COVID made it impossible to reach some people. We were supposed to have traveled to other places in the country. We actually did budgets, etc., but we just couldn't eventually make it. Also, I think that there may not have been definite or specific or overtly listed or talked about women of, all kinds. But I think that if you follow the narrative, you'd hear in different forms the different representations of women that have been through the struggle. Because even from when Prof. Chikata was talking about the women of the 50s and the 60s, it was the market women, the CPP. I mean, we didn't used to know, but we slowly are realizing that the market women meant a lot to Nkrumah and the CPP, and they were part of the struggle. And we saw them represented there in pictures, the different movements that came through that. And then also, when 31st spoke, even the montage that introduced Mrs. Rawlings, you would see different kinds of women that, even by image-wise, you could see that, they were not overly elite or etc. But also, I also think that all stories matter, and all stories are important. And, it doesn't matter if we're telling stories of elitist women or not, because every woman has had a struggle, is having a struggle, will struggle, their children will struggle. And it doesn't matter if we're born with a silver spoon in your mouth. There's, I think Amadaku has a line in her, when she introduces her, the first line in her book, The Housemaid, is about that you should say a prayer or something if you're born on this earth, a woman or something. I mean, she's just trying to say that you should just know that you're in trouble. So I don't think it matters what status or class. All stories need to be told. Sometimes we are so engrossed with supposed grassroots women, peasants, etc. We forget that the supposed educated or elitist women are also women, and surely will have stories they want to tell. So I don't think that our film limits anything. And our film doesn't also aim to want to tell everybody's story, because we've just scratched a surface. There's so much to say.
Right.
So I think we're good.
Right. Prof, I mean, coming back to you and exploring diversity and representation a bit further, there was one message that Prof, what's her name? Her name escapes me, but to the young generation, she said we must be interested in the economic issues, the social issues. Would you think that one of the things that, hinders effective participation is the economics of it all, and the politics of our country, in the way that, this country was organized, and the fact that it was several decades, after the first secondary school in the South, before the Northern Territories, for example, had a secondary school, over 10, I think 5 decades or so, several decades.
Techwa Menu.
Yes.
Techwa Menu, my big sister, also former director of this institute, talks about the economic issues. But of course, the economic issues, they run throughout the film. Other people also mention the struggles that women go through. It's related to issues of also sexual harassment comes in, and maybe let me take it from this angle. So a number of the women in the film belong to the Network for Women's Rights in Ghana, NetRight. A number of the women in the film belong to the Women's Manifesto Coalition.
Right.
these are only two of organized. I see the current convener of NetRight sitting at the back of the room, Professor Akosua Dakwa, who has also been a director of the Center for Gender Studies, and I was the first director. So there are ways in which our stories map, but that's another story. NetRight, the Women's Manifesto Coalition, these are just two organizations that place women's economic issues firmly in the conversation about everything that's going on in the country, but also that is related to women's ability to, as Georgie says in the film, live as equal citizens in Ghana. So, and again, coming to the point that Aseye made and related to the earlier question you asked, because these are organizations and these are women who put these issues on the table very forcefully, both through their scholarly work and their activism, it means that they will be the visible faces. They are the ones who have the stuff that is documented and who have consistently and constantly been linking issues of the economy to the survival of everyone in this country, not just women, but especially women and young girls. So that is key to the activism that we do, and remains key, and of course is the reason, poverty is the reason why people are struggling and, cannot live their lives in peace as they need to do. And I guess our current economic climate makes that even more difficult. We've seen how, this year, I mean, people's lives have just been derailed. People's lives have been turned upside down in less than 12 months. They can't eke out a living. We see an increase in crime. I mean, I have seen even just how traffic on the streets has reduced because people do not have the money to move. And these are realities that women face more sharply. I think I'm beginning to ramble right now. But I guess the answer is yes. It's really hard for a lot of people and very hard for women and girls.
I mean, Prof. Kate, do you think that perhaps this is yet another opportunity for women to show what they've been able to do over the years? I make this point in reference to the issue of politics and power, and the reference the former First Lady Nana Akufo-Addo Rawlings made about, democracy without women's participation is democracy for the men. And the past couple of days, I was saying that, well, maybe let's redefine democracy as democracy of the men, by the men, and for the men, with a few women in between. But politics and power, like the First Lady says, gives a lot of impetus to mobilize action, as her experience shows. How do we find a fair balance, between the politics that gives the power, the politics that can truly bring about the change, and the activism that requires so many resources that sometimes too long drawn out, and the subtle hint that perhaps even military regimes might be responsive to demands from activists and activism than we might see in democratic regimes, as we are struggling with the domestic violence bill that took forever, and the affirmative action bill that is taking forever within a democratic dispensation.
So are you all looking at me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that springs to my mind when you ask that question is this saying, power doesn't give away power. And, I think we see versions of this, not just in regard to kind of men and women, but all kinds of other cleavages as well, that power tends to seek to reproduce itself. And so it's very difficult that's why securing change is so difficult. And I think at one level, when we started this film, I did have a particular interest in affirmative action and that whole debate over the affirmative action bill. As the sort of learning process went on and more of the interviews had been done and I was looking at the transcripts and so on, one of the things that really came to me was, it was actually Auntie Dorcas Coker Apia and her talking about how challenging it is to be an activist and how difficult it is to secure concessions. And I think, although I do take your point about how many women feature in the film and the ways in which there can be women of different backgrounds who are not featuring as much in the film and so on, I do take your point. But I also think one of the things that I really hope the film has shown is that activism is incredibly hard work. To get any kind of change, any kind of concession, it is often years of leaning into those issues and persuading and debating and trying to inform public opinion and raise resources for the work. And as someone who kind of came at it from the outside, to me, the sheer level of work that's being done, the determination of some of these women, how many years of their lives they've poured into this, I found it very admirable and even quite moving, the kind of struggles that they had to go through to secure even quite small concessions. And I'd also say that, again, whilst I take your point that some, you know, a lot of these are women who have higher levels of education than would be the average for their generation in Ghana and so on. I do also think that the issues that they have focused on are not plucked from thin air. You know, so okay, someone like Kate Abam or some of the lawyers who worked on intestate succession, yes, they are from more educated backgrounds, but the issues that they picked on and the issues that they pushed and struggled on, they weren't just issues that affected women in wealthy contexts and classes. They were issues where they knew that there were women in rural areas working on cocoa farms and other things, you know, who were equally affected by these issues around intestate succession. So I would hope that the issue around representation doesn't prevent that message from coming across. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. I think I'll take some contributions from the floor and questions as well. So if you also can make your questions or contributions brief, we'll ensure we get as many inputs as there. I mean, yes. It's just amazing. Just yesterday, Prof. Stechua Menu was at the Citizens Coalition, you know, press conference, making the same demands because of the hardship. So I mean, as a young person who was perhaps the youngest to have joined the DV coalition, I just finished Legon, and I see the years of hard work that these, you know, trailblazers put and are still on it, and nobody can, you know, deceive us that activism is not a long, drawn-out, exhausting process. Yes, please, your name and your contribution and question.
Yes, hi. My name is Yana Tat, and today I have a contribution and a question. Okay, so my contribution is that I've seen this earlier and now the panels are talking about resolutions, different resolutions, and now we're talking about resolutions for the women and the children. And I'm saying that this has been going on for as long as we've seen the film, talking about many years, and we're here today. Some of us are feeling like there is maybe a little bit of improvement made, and some of us are seeing a lot. Not enough, way not enough. We look in the marketplaces, we see the women still in the market with the children, poverty, you know, poverty everywhere. And I'm saying that we'll go another decade, 20 years, 30, 40 years, the same way if certain things don't change. Like, I'm looking at the fact that human rights are coming into even businesses with the women in the marketplaces, doing businesses going forward. It will be the United Nations is coming in with a lot of aspects or rules from human rights that will take precedence. Now, for human rights, for someone to be able to even get human rights, first they have to be a human. Now we're looking at a category of races for all these women, and more, instead of I see encouragement of the women and the children understanding and identifying with who they are, I see more of a category of a black or an African being pushed on these people when, like you mentioned earlier, you said the Akan, there's Ashanti, there's Ga, there's so many different tribes of the people. When the category of black, I look and I see to myself why we say global Ghana in search of Africa's black star. What exactly does that mean? To me, it's not clear to me, it's not clear to my children, because the black as a race of people means you have no standing at law. It's saying that you're in a race that is the only category that says you're not from original peoples. The exact, based on the IPEDS, which is the database, and based on even the US census and different databases, you can check all of them and I can give you the links and details. It's saying that if you're black, a black is a person having origin in any of the black racial groups of Africa. If anyone in here can name me a black racial group of Africa, name me, because it doesn't exist. So the thing is, you have to first start with the key, opening the key to let the people have some rights. They don't have human rights if they're not considered a human. For example, a category of white. White means a person having origin in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. So the point is, I'm saying to you, when you check all those areas, the original peoples were dark-skinned. But also the databases show you that the categories do not have anything to do with your skin. So when are we going to start telling the people that, explaining to them that the black is a color, it's a color, white is a color? The bottom line is you cannot get any resolution if you're not a human. You don't have human rights. You know, so the car is parked. It's parked and it's not going to move. We can polish it, clean it, everything, if we don't get those keys to open it, unlock the door, so you can step into the realm of other races. Other races have human rights.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me just finish 1 second. So moving forward, there are going to be a lot of needs for human rights, and the packages are great. Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050, 63 is amazing, but please help the people to get human rights, and there's lots more information to go through with that. So my question is, the black star, if anyone can explain to me why we use the terminology of black for our children when we're all different shades anyway.
Very well. So they'll be chewing, the panelists will be chewing on that. That's your question. Yes, please. That's yes. Please, let's try and make the contributions brief so we can pick many.
My name is AWMA Esiedu. I really like the framing, the historical framing of the whole narrative from independence till now. I really like that, so thank you very much. But my question really, I'm just thinking, what informs this notion that the younger generation may not be taking the baton? At least I get that impression, the way that the older generation expect. What informs that? And what can be done about it? Because clearly, if they don't build on what has been done already, then we have a lost case.
Thank you very much. Any more questions, contributions? There was a hand at the back, no? Okay, so we take the remarks and then we come back for round 2. Prof.
Let me start with the last question from my sister Awo. What informs, this notion of a gap? There is a gap and there isn't a gap. I think part of the reason that there is a gap in this country is that we don't take history seriously. So I've had opportunity in the course of this meeting here to say that I wish that history would be a compulsory subject. I myself dropped history in Form 3. I became a science student, and I had to do one art subject, and I took literature because I was afraid of, not getting top grades in a class and I knew history, you have to remember dates. But that's not the way we should learn history, right? It's not about learning dates by heart. But everywhere that we have shown this film, without exception, Aseye is here, Kate is there, the younger generation have come. And when I say younger, I'm talking about people, I guess, 35 and under, but sometimes even under the age of 40, who half of the things in the film, they had no idea that they had even happened. They were clueless. They did not know a lot about Ghana's history. They certainly didn't know about struggles for the domestic violence bill. They didn't know a lot about the military eras. They just simply did not know. So, how are they going to build on something that they do not know is there? So as Georgie says in the film, we've left a certain burdensome legacy in one sense, because we've moved a number of things forward, but there's still a lot to do. So it's not about blaming young people for not knowing, but one of the things that we talk about as a team is, and also from feedback on showing the films, that we hope people use this as an educational tool, as a tool for advocacy. Even me, I live in a household, I'm well educated, my husband is well educated, our children are well educated, and when our daughters were in JSS, they used to complain that you move from Yasantua to Beijing, maybe there's a bit of Nkrumah and the bond of 1844, and then if you are lucky, you may learn about, a little bit about the PNDC. But, what's in between those dates? They do not know. And if you're, how will you build on it? So, net right, I think, we've talked about the fact that net right at some level is aging, because many of the activists are 50 plus. But net right has, in the last several years, has a few programs that have more consciously sought to bring young people into the room. And I was at a net right program just yesterday, and most of the people in the room were, guessing by looking at their faces, they are 40, 30, in their 20s. So it's happening again. And exhaustion also sometimes set in with the old layers like myself. We are just not laying as many eggs, we're tired, we're exhausted, and we need young people to join us. And again, everywhere we've shown the film, people have said, how can I join net right? Is the Women's Manifesto Coalition still active? How can I be a part of it? The conversations about race, I think when we meet in the hallways and the Black Star, and please come to the rest of the sessions, because the Black Star and that whole narrative is running through the entire conference, and I think that it will be both unfair, and I'm also not competent, or to have that in a sound bite. But yeah, we should continue that discussion.
Kate,
yeah.
do you want to take a bite on the question of why the Black Star?
No, I think if Prof is saying she doesn't feel qualified, I'm also going to say that I don't feel 100% qualified to respond to this. I regard myself as less qualified than her, so I will be quiet for a while.
But the whole issue about the intergenerational dialogue, are there any parallels with what you heard and what pertains in the UK where you work?
I do think there are quite noticeable divisions between how younger women in Britain are defining their feminism as compared to older ones. That said, you do get people of certain age who you might expect to identify more with other women in their cohort, and actually they're very much on board with the young people. So I do think there's something about generational cleavages. Feminism is a fractious sort of a movement in the sense of, because obviously it's intersectional, it intersects with so many other characteristics that of course you're going to get multiple perspectives, and trying to how can I say, the issue of solidarity, like how to build solidarity in ways that are not exclusionary and that do genuinely improve things in which large numbers of people recognise their needs being met. It is very, very challenging, but it's work that's got to be done.
Asia, how do we bridge the gap? And as I forget the name, she was asking, yeah. But the question also about why we feel that a gap exists and the burnout and how we, I had Prof speak about deliberate action, because nothing will change if, you know, there's no deliberate, consistent action. So, I mean, Net Rights is doing some involving a lot of young people, but how do we ensure that we are truly ready to hand over a baton to a next generation of young activists?
Before I say speak, so something that I wanted to say, I'm sorry. And maybe it's because I'm a glass half full kind of person. You know, yeah, we can sit in a moment where we think, it's like, what has changed? I guess also because I've been around longer, so I have a longer view. Yes, there are still so many things that need to change, right, but there's a lot that has, I mean, we've had that, yes, we struggled to get domestic violence legislation passed. I was in that group that marched to the castle, which was the seat of government. The police met us with guns. They could have killed us. We got domestic violence legislation passed. I mean, we can list a whole lot of things. Okay, we don't need our husband's signatures to get passports. It may seem like a minor thing, a passport, but there are so many things we can list that we have done, our grandmothers have done, and for which reason our daughters can take certain things for granted. And I want us to remember that, and to also know that as for struggle, it will continue till the day we die. If we think we are going to see some nirvana on this earth before we go, it's not going to happen, right? But some things will have to change, and some things will improve. And you will do some, I will do some, I say all of us in the room will do some, and not everything will come to fruition in our lifetimes. We must struggle so that our grandchildren will benefit. If I do not benefit from certain action that I'm taking, but my daughter continues, and my granddaughter continues, and my grandson, and my sons-in-law, and my sons take part, and other people benefit 100 years from now, I've done my part, right? I do not have to enjoy. I would love to, but I will not necessarily enjoy all the fruits of my labor in my lifetime, and I shouldn't put down the tools because I'm not going to see it.
I say, before you come in, let me just take two more questions, because we want to be wrapping up in the next couple of minutes. Dinner, I hear, is ready. So I'll take two more contributions. Yes, ma'am.
Now I'm speaking my name is Blessing Nawide. I'm speaking now outside of Ghana and looking at Africa, because this truly was thought-provoking, inspiring, and yes, a lot has been done and still more to do. But what are you planning to expand your research and your work to produce more documentaries around Africa's women's movements and where we are now as a continent? And is the film available for other audiences? I heard earlier you saying that you still need some rights to show pieces of it. When will it be available to others outside of these platforms?
Right. Thank you. Very wonderful input. Any other contribution? Can we hear male voice? This is not our battle alone. Please don't be like that. So we want to hear our he for she's.
Okay. My name is Karim, and I guess I would just then have to explain why I said the documentary was troubling for me. I think Professor Ampofo just touched a bit on that, but I said so also because I wondered how much more must one do then after watching everything that we have watched. And then also, I wonder whether or not activism in itself is, at the end of the day, a very vain enterprise. Because I do agree that there's been some marginal, in my view, progress based on where we have come from and all of that. And personally, watching this documentary, I've also come to even reflect a bit more on what I saw my mother do when I was young, up till maybe 9. She had this group, and I've not seen anything on it even since I've been at the African Studies and all of that. She had this group, and was not alone in that, where there were women in the village, in this particular place, this is Sankara in the Ashanti region. They were basically a cooperative union of some sort, and they did all manner of things, including going to one person's family's farm one weekend or the other, and did so many things until our family moved. And with that, I noticed that that group entirely died because my mother moved. She was the only one who could write a bit, and so could keep their names and a couple of other things and all of that. So when I look at that, and I imagine after watching this, what could have been if that group continued. And maybe Shamima may know about it. In Zongo, we used to call it meeting. That was just it, meetings. And it was a group of women groups all across various villages, towns, and all of that. These days, I don't see them anymore. So I really, are they still there? Do you know? Okay. Yeah, so I just wonder, and when I watch this, I know that this is great and fantastic, all the progressive things in there and all of that, but it's still very, very troubling.
Right. Any other last comment before we come? Prof. Akosi, I don't want to say anything about the agency of the rural, the rural woman and rural knowledge, and the fact that women have been organizing since time immemorial across classes, across various strata of the society. But I think the question is, why aren't we seeing the transformation as we might want to see it, with the kind of effort that women have put into the struggle?
Thank you. I was trying to just sit here quietly and listen for once. So great questions. I mean, I think you've alluded to some of this already. One, the fact that while the film portrays a really, really tiny version of our reality and focuses on the supposed elite, right? It doesn't mean that this work has just been done by the elite. We've just heard Karim talk about his mom. I think we all have stories of our grandmothers and the kinds of things they could get up to. They may not have called it feminism, but they were definitely not trying to be pushed around, right? And that some books, so Jean Norman is in this space, her book about We Will Not Eat Stone, tells you about the lives of everyday Ghanaian women who don't speak English, have not gone to university, but they know that this one, we are not sitting around and dealing with it. Okay, so I think that it's important to not walk away from this film with a certain sense that activism is only done by those with PhDs, because that's not true. And in the film, there were the non-PhDs in there. I came at the very end, but for me, the one woman whose story was the most powerful for me was Bob Miller, Mrs. Bob Miller, and she doesn't have a PhD. She doesn't need a PhD to know that my husband's family should not kick me out of this house. And I'm not standing for it. She doesn't need to have the PhD from wherever to be able to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind. Right? So being rural doesn't mean that you are passive, you are miserable, somebody needs to come and save you. That's not true. Why does activism take so long? Those who have power are not willing to give it up. People don't give up power. You have to go and grab it.
But do we want it enough to grab it?
We should. We should. We don't. Actually, I don't think we even have a choice in the matter.
Right.
Especially given our current circumstances. People, I don't know how many people are eating 3 square meals a day in this Ghana we are talking about. We don't have a choice in the matter at this point. If we thought before that we were okay, I don't think that we can continue to tell that story now. So I hope that people watch this and see the work others have done and commit to ensuring that in their little corner, they are going to make sure that things improve for others.
Right. Thank you for that wonderful input. I see. So you wanted to, yes. Oh, you've, everything, there was a question of,
Okay, so when will it be available? Sometime early next year, it should be open access. It's the deal with the funders that eventually people should have access to the film across the world. So it will be available, and we're putting a website together for the film, and so the information will be everywhere. We are on Twitter, we're on Instagram, you can follow us, and then you have more information. Also, that the transcripts will actually be made available in a number of public universities and libraries for access. And also that's part of the deal. So you've just seen, we had about 60 hours of footage. The least interview was about 3 hours. So, and all of that has been transcribed. So there's a lot more information from the women that is not here. And that will be also available. So rest assured, it's going to be there for everyone to access. Number two, like Prof. Dakwa said, for me, I will go back to the statement, all stories matter. Now, we should not take away, we've been talking about decolonization, and we keep falling back again into the trap where we are thinking that rural is defined as this, urban is defined as this, etc. The fact that we are even talking that binary talk means that we are back to where somebody put us, that either the rural is the other, and which is not, because they all map onto each other, and work has always happened both ways. Now, Ghanaian women have always been organizing, and we've had it in different forms and in different ways. Market women were organizing, women in education were organizing. At the time, Annie Jage was helping write the charter for on the elimination of all forms of discrimination with women. It was in the 60s. Women from the global north were not, doing all of that, but she was from this side and she was there doing it. Would you say that, so, and all the stories also as well, we do not know. So for starters, the gap is that get some knowledge, because we have just scratched the surface, but at least what we have done should help others also want to investigate, because there's a lot more to learn. But also the purpose actually of this research is to fill a certain gap. Not to close it entirely, because we can't, but at least fill the gap in that gap, So please don't walk away just thinking of why this women and why not that women, but also walk away that there's work to be done, but there has been some work, and that we're working without certain things because some people have done a certain amount of work. And we all know that recently in history, people still have to ask permission for passports in certain countries, etc. So please, when the film is available, use it for everything you want to use it for, but for us, it's an entry into a bigger conversation. Thank you very much.
Talking about an entry into bigger conversations, Kate, how do collaborations like this work? What have been the challenges, but most importantly, the key lessons, as I believe this kind of collaboration will continue? And attribution.
Well, Prof once said we had a few potholes on our road, but no manholes, and I think that's probably right. We didn't end up with any manholes that we really fell in and got stuck in. I think one of the things I've learned from this is about how funding arrangements work and how there's quite a lot of knowledge that has to go in about how funders work and their expectations, but also how institutions work, how universities on either side actually work, and the different ways in which academics organise their time and their work in different institutions. So I think collaborations are not always straightforward, in the sense that you have different kinds of pressures that come from either side, and as you go along you kind of have to learn from each other to understand, that maybe something that seems very important to you sitting over here and feels very stressful actually isn't going to be the biggest priority for somebody sitting over here, because they've got a different kind of pressure that's on their time or on their resources. So it is a learning process. Any collaborative project is a learning process. I think our funder did give us quite a lot of latitude, and we were able to navigate most things to do them in ways that were okay for all of us in the end. Even though it takes conversation, it takes negotiation. It's not just written there that everything's going to work out fine and you're always going to agree on everything, but it's working through it, and yeah, learning to understand other people's experiences and the pressures that are on them, so that you can actually finish what you've started together. And I think we were all motivated by this film. We all really wanted to do it. We really wanted to finish. So that helps us to keep going when things are difficult.
Congratulations, you did a good job. And do you have any final comment you want to make?
No, just thank you for watching. I hope that it's been enjoyable and that it can be useful for people in all kinds of ways. Like, we don't know how everybody will want to use it, but I hope that people can use it in some way that's beneficial.
Right, thank you, Kate. Prof, I'm coming back to you. I mean, I don't know if it was deliberate, whether we missed it, but she did all of the interview, or most of the interviews, right? All of the interviews, yet she was not in there. So perhaps maybe that's one significant portrayal of the fact that so many people have done so much work that we'll probably never see. But was it a deliberate, creative decision to take?
We had a discussion about that very close to the start of the project. You know, we started filming and decided that we did not want the women's stories to be interrupted by any sign of the interviewer. The questions were similar, but they were not asked in the same way. Sometimes there's a follow-up question. Maybe you'll see me pushing somebody or prodding them. You might focus more on what I said than what the woman said. And so we just decided that we needed the viewer to hear only the women's voices, and they shouldn't be interrupted by seeing or hearing the interviewer. And of course, some people know me, and then some of these stories are also my story, and somebody will say in it, oh, Akosi, I remember when we didn't want any of that. I was supposed to be the invisible. And, that was a discussion that
I think that was good. So, I mean, if you have the final word, what is the impact that you hope this documentary is going to have on, mobilizing, especially into the next generation? Are these times opportune times for us to see a certain rebirth of the women's front in Ghana, as things have really deteriorated and everybody is facing the hardship? And basically, what's your last call to action for all of us who are here this evening?
We can never give up hope, otherwise you just roll over and die. I think I speak for all of us who are involved in this film. There's another member of this, he's hiding his head, Kwame Krenzel. He did music, he did sound, he did a whole bunch of other things. He's related to one of us here, and I'm sure you can guess that a partner to somebody is not me. Thanks for coming, Kwame. But I think that for all of us hope that this will be a tool in some way to engender discussions, conversations, reignite flagging spirits and hope and so on. And let us, Aseye has been in more spaces where the film has been shown than I have, I think. The film is also doing a round of festivals. Shout out to Aseye, our amazing director. And, in many of those spaces, the feedback we get is that people want to use this film, for all that it has and all that it doesn't have. It allows at least a conversation to start, and At least this is how I'm extremely gratified when I go somewhere and we've shown the film and people are like, I want to use this, when will it be available? You know, if even that's all that happens, I will still feel that we have succeeded in doing something and done a good job.
This week, actually. So we've made about 6 or 7 festivals across the world, and as we speak, this week we are the Film Africa, which is London's biggest African diasporic film festival under the Royal African Society and SOAS. But we are also spending 10 days on the BFI player as well. So a lot more people are still going to watch this film, and it's interesting how we've been able to make the festivals, because really, ordinarily, this is not your usual festival film. Mostly it should be one woman who has struggled from the village somewhere and is trying to still, so it's really making its impact, and we hope the rest of the world will really get to enjoy it and learn from it. Thank you all very much.
And we wish you all the best. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so very much.